identical conditions, is the shatter pattern going to be the same? That was the point of the study, and they test to see what the shatter pattern was. Is there any variation? Does the craftsmanship of the glass matter? Does the type of the bullet matter? Like, what are the slight variations that can cause? Because if it's striking the surface at the same angle, at the same speed, at the same location on different pieces of glass, wouldn't you expect it to be the same? Whatever. But so I had those characters. I basically copy paste and put into the next story, the Butchers of Northshore, the Colleen, and this had some, I had some art renditions of this now, and so I had some stuff put into my OneNote, and then there were websites that got compromised, like Adobe, Chegg. What was another one? There's a website like mifuck.com or something like that that will tell you if your email was compromised, and some of my work was compromised in those data breaches, and so I just created new characters to see if anything would to see if I came across anything that resembled my story, and I called it the duality, and it was supposed to be like this absurd thing, and it's actually more toned down than the other one. The purpose of the story was to be like this absurd, crazy story, and it wound up being like a space isolation story after the events of the Butchers of Northshore, and so at the end of that story, Matt, the male protagonist, is trying to make contact with the Celestial, and he's killing all the light pollution in order to make this contact with the Celestial. And you never see it in that story, but in the follow-up, I decided to name the character Cosmos, and that's homage to Carl Sagan. And there's also a character called Hexamora, and there's more like monsters and stuff, and space creatures. But rather than, explosions, and a lot of it, actually, when I reflect on it, it's kind of like the Chronicles of Riddick. Not the Necromonger and stuff, but the Pitch Black, the third film in the trilogy. And it's Matt, wandering around space trying to avoid space monsters. So the events on Earth, basically, an Illuminati-like group called the All-Sight was destroyed and disbanded by Cosmos and Matt and Amy. And now he's in the aftermath, in the wake of that event, now there are like, space monsters kind of like pursuing Matt, and he takes on the guardianship of two young children. And one, when she comes to age, she has a romantic relationship with Matt, and she kind of like tells him that Amy's never coming back. So Matt is separated from Amy, and it's very like isolation in space, and how you doing? Matt is disfigured in the story. He wears a helmet that, you take it off and he's gonna look like, Two-Face. I always felt, like people like Tony Stark and people in the comic book movies, they get into these big fights and battles, there's no scars on them. So Matt's character is battle worn. He's got, damage to his body. He's missing limbs. He's missing facial features. And he's got a mask that he wears. Now, in the Butchers of Northshore, he wears a mask too. He's tethered to a satellite that can track your genome on the planet Earth. And in the third season, because I wrote that thing as a trilogy, as a episodic television show. In the third season, he's removed from his helmet and it becomes tethered to his satellite. So he also has these balls that destroy the environment, and it becomes tethered to this technology that the satellite allows you. So I didn't even think of this until after I wrote it. But this technology shows up in the Philadelphia Project. Matt is a government contractor, so he builds defense technology and medical technology. And for the Obama administration, he built a technology called the Eye of Ra, which uses a genome tracking technology to identify anybody on the face of the earth. And in the story, that's how they find Osama bin Laden. And now, in the next story, it can, he kind of uses it as like a weaponized thing. You don't really see too much of it, but I thought perhaps that the celestial that he was making contact with was actually him, like it's his satellite. So he's like chasing his own tail type thing. Because originally when I created the story, it's supposed to be an exaggeration of schizophrenia, where in the first season he was seeing Amy, and he was only seeing Amy by himself. And it was meant to be like, does Amy exist? The audience is supposed to be left in suspense. Is she just a hallucination? Is she a figment of Matt's imagination? And as it turns out, they are former business partners, and she's the one carrying out all these assassinations, and she's trying to pin it on Matt because it's his technology, and I guess he has motive because he was blacklisted by the government. And so in the second season, Matt pursues Amy. He's chasing her down. He's trying to kill her for, placing these murders on him. And in the third season, he becomes obsessed with making contact with the Celestial. So in the second season, he's held captive by Amy. She cuts off his arm, and she puts him in isolation. She removes his helmet and removes the balls that destroy the environment. So while in isolation, he becomes tethered to his technology, and he uses that to escape. And then he becomes obsessed with making contact with the Celestial, and it becomes less, policy driven, where in the first season, Matt was trying to pass healthcare reform that would benefit everybody, and it was passed over for some sort of energy thing, and he was kind of, slighted. They stabbed him in the back type thing. If this isn't how politics works, I'm someone who has somewhat of political apathy, but this is how it's written up in the story. And of course, if I'm going to publish something, I would, perhaps consult with a politician. They have people who consult, with experts. Is this how it would happen in real life? That's one of the things they tell me as a psychologist. I can serve as consulting for books and characters and stuff on television shows to give them expert advice. And so he's retired. He's resting on the wealth from his medical device company and his government contracting, and he has his eyeballs removed because the government, is, they use him as like a scapegoat. They blacklist him because of his position, his stance against the government. And Amy is like a disciple of him. She still loves him even though they're separated.